Someone, from your playing staff comes in and says, "Boss, I think you're doing this wrongly."
Good. Well, I ask him which way he thinks it should be done. We get down to it, and then we talk about it for 20 minutes, and then we decide I was right.
Some men inspire, others intimidate. Brian Clough did both at the same time. He didn't smile to be liked. He didn't manage to be thanked. He managed to win. And to win his way, or not at all, he stepped into broken clubs and demanded miracles. And when they doubted him, he gave them trophies they never dreamed of, then turned around and reminded them who delivered it. Clough's Forest ruled Europe. His Derby side rewrote history, but behind every triumph stood a trail of fractured egos, cold silences, and players who never understood whether he loved them or wanted to destroy them. He was obsessed with standards, obsessed with control, and he despised weakness, especially when it dressed itself as talent. You could survive under Brian Clough. You could even thrive, but only if you surrendered your pride. Because once you crossed the line, he didn't shout. He didn't forgive. He ended you. With a stare, a quote, or a silence that never lifted. Subscribe if you believe power is earned by fire, not by comfort. Brian Clough didn't walk into Elland Road to coach. He came to tear down a kingdom he'd spent years mocking. He hated Don Revie's Leeds, hated their aggression, and now he was their manager. The room stared back in silence. He looked at the team and said, "You can throw your medals in the bin, you didn't win them fairly." Billy Bremner's jaw tightened. Captain, enforcer, heart of that empire. Clough had just humiliated him in front of everyone. Johnny Giles kept calm, but years later he said he came in with both guns blazing and no idea how to handle people. Peter Lorimer watched the scene, bitter and cold. He said later, he didn't want to lead us. He wanted to destroy what we were. And maybe he did. Clough tried to erase Revie's shadow with fury, not respect. And in doing so, he lit a fire he couldn't contain. He lasted 44 days, not because he failed tactically, but because they never let him breathe. The Leeds players didn't just reject Clough, they buried him. And when he walked out, no one followed. He was quick, strong, confident, and different. Justin Fashanu didn't beg for attention. He demanded the ball. The cameras followed. The headlines exploded. He smiled anyway. In 1981, Clough signed him for £1 million, Forest's record, England's first black £1 million footballer. But the weight was heavier than the fee, and the room colder than the cheque. Clough didn't like the lifestyle. Didn't like the questions. Didn't like being challenged by a player who refused to hide. Then one day during training, Clough stopped him in front of the squad and said, "Where do you go if you want a loaf of bread?" Justin hesitated. Clough snapped, "I go to the baker's. So why do you keep going to that bloody nightclub?" The message was clear. And cruel. He was benched. Frozen. Sold. From that moment on, Fashanu was done at Forest, and Clough never spoke to him again. Years later, Fashanu said, "It was like I didn't exist." And when the silence became unbearable, the pain went with him. Clough never apologised, never explained. Only said, "I'm not homophobic, I just didn't fancy him." The dressing room said nothing. The club moved on, but a career had been shattered, and a man had been left alone. He played like a street fighter in a football kit. All fire, no fear. Roy Keane didn't ease into the game. He arrived like he already owned it. And Brian Clough? He liked that. But he liked control more. 1991 FA Cup. One mistake, a blind back pass. Forest lost. Keane walked into the dressing room, silent, hands down. Head low, Clough was already waiting. He didn't say a word, didn't give a warning. He just walked up and punched him in the face. He punched me straight in the face, and I respected him for it. Keane said it without flinching. No shouting, no lectures. Just a fist that said, "Don't make me speak twice." The dressing room stood still. Because under Clough, everyone understood. Respect wasn't asked for. It was enforced. Keane didn't run. He stayed. Fought, became steel. That was Clough's method. No speeches. No sympathy. Only pain with a purpose. And that purpose? To make men tougher than the world they'd face. He was young, sharp, confident enough to think he could impress Brian Clough. One afternoon, playing in the reserves, Nigel Jemson scored a goal and celebrated like he'd won the league. Clough didn't shout, didn't say a word on the touchline. He waited. Inside the tunnel, Clough walked up to him. looked him in the eye and said, "Have you ever been punched in the stomach?" Jemson didn't answer. Clough punched him, then said, "You have now." That was it. One swing. No warning. Lesson delivered. Jemson flew back a few steps. Chest rattled. Mind reset. There were no speeches under Clough. No second chances for ego. He didn't believe in showboating. Didn't believe in stars. Only in control. If you played for Clough, you played his way. Or you got the message. Straight to the gut. He had pace. He had instinct. He had everything. Except Clough's approval. Tony Woodcock came through the Forest ranks like lightning. But Clough didn't see what others saw. Didn't like the attitude. Didn't like the look. So he sent him away. On loan. Out of sight. That was Clough's way. He didn't always scream. Sometimes the punishment was silence. No explanation. No development plan. Just exile. Woodcock left. And exploded. Goals. Applause. Form. When he came back, he couldn't be ignored. He won his place. Won trophies. Won respect. But Clough never praised him. Not really. Because the point wasn't to say well done. It was to remind everyone. Your place here depends on me. Talent was never enough. Loyalty wasn't enough. Clough had to believe in you. And even if you succeeded, he'd never let you forget. He could have buried you just as easily. Brian Clough didn't just clash with players. He fought chairmen, directors, the media, his own reflection. At Derby, he turned nobodies into champions, then quit after the board refused him control. He wanted power, not permission. And when they said no, he walked. At Leeds, they never wanted him. At Forest, they learned to fear him. But in the end, even the trophies couldn't protect him from what came next. The drinking crept in. The silence deepened. He burned bridges, some never rebuilt. Peter Taylor, his closest friend, gone after a final betrayal. They never spoke again. Then came the illness, liver failure, transplant, stomach cancer. He won everything, but he died with too many things unsaid. The directors he cursed, the players he punched, the friends he lost. He said, "I've not been well, I've had problems. I'll take the blame." But Clough never really admitted defeat. Even as his body broke down, his legend never did. He was surrounded by glory and haunted by ghosts. That was Brian Clough, the man who won it all and still never let go of what he couldn't control. When the noise faded, when the trophies gathered dust, all that was left was the silence. Brian Clough never came back to apologise. Not to the players, not to the clubs, not even to the ones he called friends. He left them bruised and brilliant. They called him a genius, but only after he was gone. He gave Derby its first title, took Forest from the shadows to 2 European Cups, built miracles, then tore them down before anyone else could. They asked him once what his greatest achievement was. He didn't say the trophies, he said, keeping Nottingham Forest in the First Division for 18 years. That was Clough, always pointing where no one else looked, always rewriting what greatness meant. He never managed England, never played politics, never chased praise. But his fingerprints are still on every dressing room, where control is law and loyalty is tested. To some, he was a bully. To others, a saint. But of course, in that time, in that era, he was a legend. Not perfect, not kind, but unforgettable. Because Brian Clough didn't care how the world would remember him. He only cared that it never forgot. Subscribe if you believe greatness is earned through fear, silence, and fire.